Welcome. You found your way to a quiet place. Take a moment now to settle in, to loosen your shoulders, to slow your breathing, to let the noise of the day gently fall away. Tonight, you're not rushing anywhere. Nothing is expected of you. You're simply here to listen and to rest. A timeless story is waiting for you. One filled with ancient streets, fading light, and the soft rhythm of an evening walk long ago. Let the world grow distant. Let your thoughts become lighter, and when you're ready, we'll begin. The light is changing now, as it always does at this hour, golden and thick, like honey poured slowly across the western sky. Marcus stands at the threshold of the Temple of Mercury, his weathered hand resting against the smooth marble doorframe, and he watches the sun begin its descent toward the Bay of Neapolis. He has stood here countless times before, so many evenings that they blur together like watercolors left too long in the rain. But each sunset still holds its own particular character, its own quiet message written in shades of amber and rose. He is 73 years old, though the exact number matters less with each passing year. His body tells the story more honestly than any calendar. The stiffness in his left knee that predicts rain, the way his fingers have begun to curl slightly inward like autumn leaves, the silver beard that catches the evening light and turns it into something almost luminous. But his eyes remain clear, still the same deep brown they have always been, and they see everything with a patience that only decades can teach. The temple behind him is quiet now. The last supplicant left an hour ago, a merchant's wife seeking blessing for her husband's voyage to Alexandria. Marcus had watched her place her offering of dried figs and honeycomb on the altar, had seen the way her lips moved in silent prayer, had noted the slight tremor in her hands that spoke of genuine concern. He had tended the sacred flame, added fresh oil to the lamps, and swept the marble floor until it gleamed in the slanting light. These are his duties, have been his duties for 52 years, ever since he was a young man of 21, newly arrived from Rome with dreams he can barely remember now. The air is warm but not oppressive. This is late spring in Baiae, when the heat of summer has not yet settled its full weight upon the land, when evening breezes still carry a memory of coolness from the mountains to the east. Marcus breathes deeply, drawing the air into his lungs with conscious gratitude. He can smell the sea, always the sea here, that clean salt scent that mingles with everything else. But there are other fragrances, too. The sulfur from the thermal springs that made this town famous, the jasmine that grows wild along the temple walls, the distant smoke from cooking fires as families prepare their evening meals. He reaches for his walking stick, a sturdy length of olive wood polished smooth by years of handling. It is not strictly necessary, not yet, but it provides a certain reassurance, a third point of contact with the earth as he begins his nightly walk. This is his ritual, as regular as the tides, as predictable as the stars. When his work at the temple is complete, when the sacred flame has been fed and the doors secured, Marcus walks. He walks through the streets of Baiae as the light fades, as lamps begin to glow in windows, as the world transitions from the busy clamor of day into the gentler rhythms of night. He is not sure when this walking became so important to him. Perhaps it was always there, this need to move through the town as evening falls, to trace the same paths, over and over, like a meditation, like a prayer spoken with feet instead of words. The walking helps him think, helps him remember, helps him let go of the small concerns that accumulate during the day like dust on a shelf. More than that, it connects him to this place in a way that feels essential. Baiae has been his home for more than 5 decades now, and his evening walks are his way of touching that home, of acknowledging it, of being present to it in the deepest way he knows. He descends the temple steps slowly, mindful of the worn places where countless feet have left their mark over the centuries. The Temple of Mercury is old, older than Marcus, older than anyone currently living in Baiae. It was built in the time of Augustus, or so the stories say, when the emperor himself came to these healing waters to ease the pain of old wounds. Marcus has always loved the layers of time visible in the temple's stones, the way newer repairs sit alongside ancient craftsmanship, the way each generation leaves its trace while the essential structure remains. The street before him is paved with large rectangular stones, fitted together with such precision that grass has never managed to take root between them. This is the Via Herculaneum, one of the main thoroughfares of Baiae, and it stretches away before him in a gentle curve that follows the contour of the bay. In the hours of commerce, this street would be crowded with merchants and customers, slaves carrying loads on their shoulders, children playing in the margins, dogs looking for scraps. But now, in this transitional time between day and night, the street is nearly empty. A few late stragglers hurry toward home. A slave girl carries a jug of water balanced on her head, her spine perfectly straight, her feet knowing the way without conscious thought. Marcus turns left, heading toward the heart of the temple district. This is where he always begins his walk, moving through the sacred geography of Baiae before venturing into the more secular spaces. The air seems to hold a different quality here among the temples, as if the countless prayers offered up over the decades have left some residue, some lingering presence of devotion and hope. Perhaps that is mere fancy, Marcus thinks, but he has learned not to dismiss the things that cannot be easily explained. He has lived long enough to know that the world contains mysteries that resist simple understanding. A cat crosses his path, a lean gray creature with calculating eyes. It pauses to look at him, seems to recognize him from previous evenings, then continues on its way with feline indifference. Marcus smiles slightly. He has always liked cats. Their independence, their self-possession, the way they move through the world as if they own it. The Romans, he knows, have a complicated relationship with cats. Not quite pets, not quite pests, something in between. But here in Baiae, as in most coastal towns, cats serve a useful purpose, keeping the rat population under control, and so they are tolerated, even occasionally fed. His stick taps softly against the stones as he walks, creating a gentle rhythm that matches his steady pace. He is in no hurry. He has nowhere to be except here, in this moment, in this light. The sun is lower now, touching the horizon with its lower edge, and the quality of the light has shifted into something richer, more intense. Everything seems outlined in gold. The edges of buildings, the leaves of trees, even the faces of the few people he passes. It is the light that painters dream of, that poets attempt to describe, and always fall short. Marcus simply witnesses it, lets it wash over him, accepts its gift without trying to capture or explain it. The street opens into a small plaza, and Marcus pauses here for a moment, as he always does. In the center of the plaza stands a fountain, its water supplied by the same volcanic springs that feed the famous baths of Baiae. The water emerges from the mouth of a bronze dolphin, arcing through the air in a continuous stream that catches the light and shatters it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. The sound is soothing, that particular music water makes when it falls and splashes, a sound that seems to wash away tension, to smooth the rough edges of thought. Marcus approaches the fountain and cups his hands beneath the stream, bringing the water to his lips. It is warm, almost hot, with a slightly mineral taste that speaks of its journey through deep stone. This water has healing properties, or so people believe. They come from all over the empire to bathe in these waters, to drink them, to be cured of ailments, both physical and spiritual. Marcus is not sure he believes in miracles, but he does believe in the power of hope. And if these waters give people hope, then perhaps that is miracle enough. As he drinks, he notices a young woman sitting on the edge of the fountain, trailing her fingers through the water. She looks tired, her posture slightly slumped, and there is something in her face that suggests she has traveled a long way. Marcus nods to her, a simple acknowledgement of shared humanity, and she nods back, offering a small, weary smile. Then Marcus moves on, respecting her solitude, understanding that sometimes people need to be alone with their thoughts, with their prayers, with whatever burdens they carry. The temples rise around him now, their facades still warm with captured sunlight. The Temple of Venus stands to his right, its Corinthian columns elegant and graceful, topped with acanthus leaves carved with such delicacy they seem almost alive. The Temple of Diana occupies the opposite side of the plaza, more austere in its decoration but no less impressive in its proportions, and further on, partially hidden by a grove of cypress trees, he can see the curved dome of the Temple of Mercury's sister structure, the baths that bear the god's name and draw visitors from across the known world. Marcus continues walking, his pace steady and unhurried. The shadows are lengthening now, stretching across the stones like dark fingers reaching toward the east. In these shadows, the city seems to multiply itself, to become more than it is, every object casting its double, every column creating a matching stripe of darkness. Marcus has always found something beautiful in this multiplication, this dance of light and shadow that happens twice each day, at dawn and dusk. A slave is lighting the street lamps now, moving from one to the next with practiced efficiency. He carries a long pole with a burning taper at its end, and as Marcus watches, he touches flame to wick, and small lights begin to bloom along the Via Herculaneum like flowers, opening in reverse, awakening as the natural light fades. The slave is young, perhaps 16 or 17, and he moves with the unconscious grace of youth. Marcus wonders about his story, where he came from, how he ended up here, what dreams he might harbor in the privacy of his own thoughts. But these are questions that will remain unanswered. The social distance between a temple keeper and a slave is not great, but it is enough to prevent casual conversation, especially here in public. The first stars are beginning to appear now, faint points of light in the deep blue dome of the sky. Venus is there, the evening star, low in the west where the sun has just departed. Marcus knows the stars well, has studied them during countless night watches at the temple. He knows the stories the Greeks tell about them, the patterns they trace across the heavens, the way they can be used to navigate both physical and metaphorical journeys. There is something comforting about the stars, he thinks, the way they return, night after night, following patterns established before human memory began, indifferent to the small dramas and concerns of mortal life. A breeze stirs the air, carrying with it the scent of cooking food, bread baking, fish grilling over charcoal, herbs and oil and garlic mingling into that particular aroma that means home, that means sustenance, that means life continuing in its most basic and essential form. Marcus realizes that he is hungry, that he has not eaten since midday, but the hunger is not urgent. He will eat later, after his walk is complete. For now, the walking itself seems to feed something deeper than physical hunger, some need that cannot be satisfied with bread and fish. Part 2. Among the Sacred Stones. The temple district of Baiae is not large, but it is dense with history, with meaning, with the accumulated weight of centuries of devotion. Marcus walks slowly through this landscape he knows better than any other, his feet finding their way without conscious direction. To his left stands the Temple of Venus, dedicated to the goddess of love and beauty, and he pauses for a moment to look up at its facade. The marble seems to glow in the fading light, as if lit from within, and the carved details cast intricate shadows that add depth and texture to the stone. He remembers when he first came to Baiae, a young man fresh from Rome, still carrying the dust of that city on his sandals and in his lungs. Everything had seemed strange to him then. The smell of sulfur from the volcanic springs, the humid warmth that never quite left even in winter. The way people here moved more slowly than in the capital, as if the healing waters had seeped into their very bones and taught them a different rhythm. He had felt displaced, uncertain, wondering if he had made the right choice in accepting this position as assistant to the elderly temple keeper of Mercury. But the old keeper, Marcus cannot remember his name now, though he remembers the man's face with perfect clarity, the deeply lined features and the eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface of things, had been kind to him, patient. The old man had understood that Marcus needed time to adjust, to find his footing in this new place. He had taught Marcus not just the practical duties of maintaining the temple, but something deeper, how to be present, how to listen, how to recognize the sacred in the everyday. Every stone has a story, the old keeper had told him once, as they walked together through these same streets in the evening light. Every person who passes carries a prayer in their heart, whether they speak it aloud or not. Your job is not to judge or interpret, but simply to tend the flame, to keep the doors open, to be here when people need a place to bring their hopes and fears. Marcus has tried to live by that wisdom. For 52 years, he has tended the flame. For 52 years, he has kept the doors open. For 52 years, he has been present, watching the endless procession of humanity pass through the temple, the sick seeking healing, the travelers seeking safe passage, the merchants seeking profitable ventures, the parents seeking blessings for their children. So many faces, so many stories. After a while, they begin to blur together, but occasionally one stands out. One lingers in memory with particular clarity. He remembers a woman who came to the temple 20 years ago, her face ravaged by grief. Her son had drowned in the bay, caught by an unexpected current while swimming. She had come to make an offering, to pray for his spirit, to find some way to bear the unbearable. Marcus had said nothing. What words could possibly help? But he had stood with her in the temple as she wept, had allowed his presence to serve as a kind of witness to her pain. When she finally left, she had touched his hand briefly, a gesture of gratitude that needed no words. He wonders sometimes where that woman is now, whether she found peace, whether the sharp edges of her grief have been worn smooth by time. He likes to think so. He likes to believe that the temple provided her with something she needed, even if it was nothing more than a space to acknowledge her loss, to honor it, to begin the slow work of carrying it forward. The temple of Diana rises before him now, its steps leading up to a portico supported by 6 stout columns. This temple is older than the others in the district, built in the time of the Republic, and its architecture reflects an earlier aesthetic, less ornate than the structures built under the emperors, more austere and dignified. Marcus has always admired this temple, has always felt a kind of kinship with its plain-spoken elegance. Diana, the huntress, the goddess of the moon and wild places. There is something fitting about her having a temple here in Baiae, Marcus thinks, despite the town's reputation for luxury and indulgence. Because beyond the villas and baths, beyond the crowds of wealthy Romans who come here to take the waters and conduct their intrigues, there are still wild places. The forests on the hills above the town still shelter deer and boar. The moon still rises over the bay with the same indifferent beauty it has always possessed. The wild is never far away, even in the midst of civilization. An elderly woman is ascending the temple steps, moving slowly, her hand gripping the stone rail for support. Marcus recognizes her, Lucia, a widow who lives in the insulae near the market. She comes to Diana's temple every evening at this hour, has been doing so for as long as Marcus has known her. He does not know what she prays for, but he respects the constancy of her devotion, the way she maintains this ritual regardless of weather or health. "Good evening, Lucia," he calls softly, not wanting to startle her. She turns, squinting slightly in the dimming light, then smiles when she recognizes him. "Marcus, still walking your rounds?" "Always," he replies. "The day feels incomplete without it." She nods, understanding. "The gods give us our patterns," she says, "and we follow them as best we can." It is a simple observation, but it contains a kind of wisdom. Marcus tips his head in acknowledgement, and Lucia continues her climb toward the temple entrance. He watches until she disappears into the shadows of the portico, then continues on his way. The street curves slightly here, following the natural contour of the land, and Marcus follows it, his stick tapping against the stones in that steady rhythm that has become like a heartbeat. Like breath. Automatic, essential, barely noticed except in its absence. The light is fading more rapidly now. The sun has set, slipped below the horizon, and only the afterglow remains, that strange luminous quality that comes between day and night, when the world seems to hold its breath, suspended between 2 states of being. He passes the shrine of the Lares, the household gods who watch over every Roman home and family. This is a small structure, hardly more than an alcove in the wall, but it is maintained with care. Fresh flowers sit in a bronze vase before the images of the twin gods, and the scent of recent incense still lingers in the air. Someone has been here recently, Marcus realizes, making an offering, speaking a prayer. These small shrines are everywhere in Baiae, scattered throughout the city like seeds, and collectively they create a kind of spiritual geography, a map of devotion that overlays the physical map of streets and buildings. Marcus remembers his own family lares from childhood in Rome, the small household shrine where his mother would make daily offerings, where she taught him the prayers that connected their particular family to the vast web of Roman religion. That shrine is long gone now, of course, along with the house that contained it, along with his mother and father, and the siblings he rarely thinks of anymore. But the memory remains, not sharp or painful, but gentle, like something seen through water, distorted but recognizable, changed but essentially true. The Via Herculaneum widens here, creating a small open space where several streets converge. In the center stands a fountain, though this one is different from the one in the temple plaza. Here the water flows from the mouth of a bronze lion, its expression fierce and protective, and the basin beneath is larger, designed to serve as a gathering place, a spot where people can fill their water jugs and exchange news and gossip. At this hour the fountain is nearly empty. A single slave fills the amphora with water, the liquid making a hollow gurgling sound as it rushes into the clay vessel. The sound is oddly pleasant, Marcus thinks, one of those small noises that make up the texture of daily life, but often go unnoticed. He has learned to pay attention to these small things, has learned that life is not made up of grand gestures or momentous events, but rather of these tiny, repeated actions. Water filling a jug, bread baking in an oven, feet walking across stone. The slave finishes filling his vessel, hoists it onto his shoulder with practiced ease, and hurries away down one of the side streets. His footsteps echo briefly off the walls, then fade into silence. Marcus is alone now, or feels alone, though he knows there are people in the houses around him, lives being lived behind those walls and shuttered windows. But in this public space, in this moment of transition between day and night, he has a sense of solitude that feels both melancholy and peaceful. He continues walking, leaving the fountain behind, moving now toward the edge of the temple district, where it transitions into the area of the great public baths. The baths of Baiae are famous throughout the empire, rivaling even those in Rome itself. They draw visitors from every corner of the known world, senators and merchants, philosophers and athletes, the sick and the healthy, all coming to immerse themselves in these volcanic waters that promise healing, or at least relief from the pains and burdens of ordinary existence. Marcus has never been much of a bather himself. Oh, he visits the baths occasionally, as social convention demands, but he does not have the taste for it that some men do, the desire to spend hours lounging in the hot pools, gossiping and conducting business and indulging in the various pleasures that the baths offer. He prefers simpler forms of refreshment, a cool drink of water, a moment of quiet contemplation, his evening walks through the town. But he respects the baths, understands their importance to Baiae's identity and economy. Without the baths, this would be just another small coastal town, pleasant enough but unremarkable. The thermal springs have made Baiae special, have drawn the wealth and attention that have shaped everything else about the place. Even the temples owe their grandeur to the prosperity that the baths have brought. The air is cooler now, Marcus notices. The heat of the day has begun to dissipate, radiating back up into the darkening sky, and the evening breeze from the sea has strengthened slightly. It carries with it not just the smell of salt, but also the complex scent of the baths, that mixture of sulfur and steam and human bodies and perfumed oils that is so distinctive, so immediately recognizable. Some people find the smell unpleasant, but Marcus has grown accustomed to it. It is simply part of Baiae, part of the town's character, no more remarkable than the sound of waves against the shore. He reaches the boundary of the bath complex, marked by a high wall topped with decorative tiles. Through the open gateway, he can hear the sounds of the baths, even at this late hour, voices echoing off marble walls, water splashing, the occasional burst of laughter. The baths stay open until well after dark, catering to those who prefer to bathe in the evening or who are just arriving after a day's journey. Torches and oil lamps illuminate the interior, creating a warm glow that spills out through windows and doorways. Marcus does not enter. His path takes him along the outside of the wall, following a street that runs parallel to the bath complex. This street is quieter than the main thoroughfares, used mostly by the slaves and workers who serve the baths. The men who haul wood for the furnaces, the women who wash the linens, the masseurs and oil sellers and snack vendors who make their living from the endless stream of bathers. A few of these workers are visible now, finishing their day's labor or preparing for the evening shift. Marcus exchanges nods with those he recognizes, offers a quiet greeting here and there. There's a different feeling to this street, a different energy. In the temple district, everything is oriented toward the sacred, toward devotion and prayer. Here, the orientation is toward service, toward work, toward the mundane necessities that make comfort and luxury possible for others. Marcus finds this honesty refreshing. There's no pretense on this street, no false grandeur, just people doing what needs to be done, earning their living, getting through the day. In some ways, he thinks, this is closer to the heart of what it means to be human than all the marble temples and elegant villas. We are, at base, creatures who must work to survive, who must serve one another in countless small ways, who must maintain the systems that allow civilization to function. The wall curves ahead of him, following the irregular shape of the bath complex, and Marcus follows it, letting his feet choose the pace, letting his mind drift. This is what he loves about his evening walks, the way they free his thoughts, allow them to wander without direction or purpose. During the day at the temple, he must be focused, attentive, ready to respond to whatever needs present themselves. But here, in the gentle anonymity of the evening streets, he can simply be, without obligation or expectation. Part 3. The Springs of Mercury. The path ahead you begins to slope gently downward, and Marcus knows without looking that he is approaching the springs themselves, the source of all that makes Baiae famous and prosperous. These are not the artificial pools of the great bath complexes, but the natural springs where the volcanic waters emerge from the earth, steaming and mineral-rich, channeled into simple basins that have been used since before the Romans, since before the Greeks who settled this coast, perhaps since before anyone can remember. The springs of Mercury, they are called, though Marcus has heard older people use different names, names in languages that predate Latin, that reach back to the ancient peoples who first recognized the healing power of these waters. The springs lie in a shallow valley between two low hills, and as Marcus descends the path, he can see the steam rising ahead of him, white and ghostly in the gathering darkness, lit from beneath by torches that mark the location of the various pools and channels. The air grows warmer as he descends, almost oppressively so, thick with moisture and the sharp scent of sulfur that makes his eyes water slightly. But there is something else in the air, too, something Marcus has never been able to name precisely. A quality of expectation, perhaps, or possibility, as if the springs themselves carry some promise of transformation, some hope of renewal. People have been coming here for centuries, seeking exactly that. Transformation, renewal, healing, relief from pain both physical and spiritual. The path levels out, and Marcus finds himself at the edge of the spring complex. It is a place of contradictions, he has always thought. Ancient and modern at once, natural and constructed, sacred and commercial. The springs themselves are natural phenomena, water heated by volcanic forces deep beneath the earth, forced to the surface through cracks and fissures in the stone. But over the centuries, human hands have shaped these springs, directing their flow, creating pools and channels, building structures to shelter bathers from sun and rain. Some of these structures are quite old, dating back to the early days of Roman settlement. Others are newer, built within Marcus's own lifetime, and scattered among them are even more ancient stones, fragments of Greek construction, perhaps even remnants of the indigenous peoples who lived here before the Greeks. The layers of history are visible if you know how to look, Marcus thinks, like strata in a cliff face, each age leaving its mark on the landscape. At this hour, most of the commercial bathing is taking place in the great public baths higher up the hill. Here at the springs themselves, there are fewer people, mostly locals who prefer the simpler, less crowded facilities, or seekers of particular types of healing, who believe that the waters are more potent here at their source. Marcus sees a handful of figures moving in the steam, their forms indistinct and ghostly, more suggestion than substance. He walks slowly along the edge of the largest pool, where water bubbles up from a cleft in the rock with enough force to create a constant roiling motion on the surface. The water is almost too hot to touch. Marcus knows this from experience. But some believe that the hottest springs have the greatest healing power. He has seen people lower themselves into this water slowly, wincing at the heat, their faces contorted with discomfort that gradually gives way to relief as their bodies adjust. A stone bench sits beside the pool, worn smooth by decades of use, and Marcus sits down carefully, grateful for the rest. His knee has begun to ache slightly, that familiar reminder of age and the toll that years take on joints and bones. He stretches his leg out before him, working the stiffness out, while his eyes track the movement of steam across the surface of the pool. There's a man in the water, Marcus notices, an older fellow, perhaps near Marcus's own age, his head resting back against the stone edge of the pool, his eyes closed. His face is peaceful, almost serene, and Marcus wonders what pain or ailment has brought him here. Arthritis, perhaps, or the accumulated aches of a lifetime of labor, or maybe something less tangible, weariness of spirit, a heaviness of heart that cannot be named, but nonetheless feels like a physical burden. Marcus does not disturb the man's meditation. Instead, he turns his attention to the landscape around the springs, taking in the details with the practiced eye of long familiarity. The hills rise steeply on either side, their slopes covered with scrub vegetation and wild herbs that thrive in the volcanic soil. He can smell rosemary and thyme on the breeze, sharp green scents that cut through the sulfur and provide a pleasant counterpoint. Behind him, further up the slope, he can hear the night sounds of the town, distant voices, the clatter of a cart on cobblestones, a dog barking somewhere. But here in this valley those sounds are muted, softened by distance and the acoustic dampening effect of the steam. It creates a sense of remove, of separation, as if the springs exist in a different realm, governed by different rules. He remembers bringing his wife here, decades ago, when they were still newly married, and she was suffering from a persistent cough that would not yield to ordinary remedies. A physician had recommended the waters of Baiae, claiming that breathing the steam would help clear her lungs. And so Marcus had brought her here, had sat with her beside these same pools while she inhaled the mineral-laden vapor, hoping for relief. The memory is bittersweet. The waters had helped, or perhaps simply time had done its work. It was impossible to say which. Her cough had gradually improved over the weeks they spent at the springs. But she had died years later of a different ailment, one that no amount of healing water could touch. Cancer, the physicians had called it, that mysterious disease that eats away at the body from within, that cannot be cut out or purged or driven away with medicine or prayer. Marcus had been 47 when she died, young enough that remarriage would have been expected, practical even, but he had never felt the desire. His work at the temple had filled his days, and his memories of her had filled his nights, and that had seemed sufficient. Perhaps it was cowardice, he sometimes thought, this reluctance to open himself to another person, to risk that kind of loss again. Or perhaps it was simply that he had been fortunate enough to experience love once, and having known it, he did not need to seek it again. The man in the pool opens his eyes and catches Marcus watching him. He offers a slight nod, acknowledgement of shared presence, and Marcus nods back. Then the man closes his eyes again, sinking deeper into the water, until only his head remains above the surface. And Marcus looks away, granting him privacy. A slave girl appears from one of the small structures that dot the spring area, storage sheds for towels and oils, Marcus knows, places where bathers can change their clothes and leave their belongings. She carries a tray with several clay cups and a pitcher, which she sets down on a stone table near one of the smaller pools. Steam curls up from the cups, and Marcus realizes they contain the spring water itself, cooled enough to drink but still warm. Some people believe that drinking the water enhances its healing effect, that the minerals work from within as well as without. The girl glances at Marcus, and he can see her weighing whether to approach him, to offer him a drink. He is clearly not here to bathe, but perhaps he might want to drink the waters. Marcus saves her the uncertainty by standing, by giving her a slight shake of his head that means, "No thank you," delivered kindly enough that she will not feel she has failed in her service. She accepts his refusal with a small bob of her head and moves on to the man in the pool, offering him refreshment. Marcus begins walking again, following a narrow path that leads away from the main pools toward some of the smaller, more remote springs. These are less developed, less manicured, closer to what the springs must have looked like centuries ago, before the Romans arrived with their engineering and their desire to organize and improve everything they encountered. Here, the water simply pools where it emerges, creating small natural basins that overflow and create tiny streams that meander down the hillside. The path is rougher here, less frequently used, and Marcus must watch his footing more carefully. The stones are slick with moisture and mineral deposits, and the light is fading rapidly now, making it harder to see obstacles. But he knows this path well, has walked it countless times, and his feet find the safe places almost automatically. He reaches a spot where a spring emerges from between two large boulders, the water flowing down the stone face in a thin sheet that catches what little light remains and turns it silver. This is one of his favorite places in all of Baiae, though he would be hard-pressed to explain exactly why. Perhaps it is the simplicity of it, the lack of human intervention. The water flows as it has always flowed, following the path of least resistance, responding to gravity and geology rather than human design. Marcus stands before the flowing water, close enough that the spray touches his face in tiny droplets, warm and mineral-rich. He closes his eyes and simply stands there, breathing, feeling the warmth on his skin, listening to the soft murmur of water over stone. This is a form of prayer, he thinks, though no words are spoken, no petition made to any god, simply being here, being present to this moment, to this place, to the patient work of water moving over stone. This is sufficient. How long he stands there, he cannot say. Time moves differently in such moments, becomes elastic, unreliable. It could be minutes or hours, but eventually he becomes aware that full darkness has fallen, that the last traces of twilight have been absorbed into night, and that he should continue his walk before the path becomes too treacherous to navigate safely. He opens his eyes, takes one last look at the flowing water, and turns back toward the main path. The torches marking the larger pools provide enough light to guide him, small islands of illumination in the darkness. He makes his way carefully back up the slope, his stick tapping against the stone, his breath coming a bit more heavily with the exertion of climbing. Age, he thinks ruefully. It comes to all of us, patient and inexorable as the tide. By the time he reaches the top of the path and emerges back onto the level ground near the bath complex, his breathing has returned to normal, and his knee has stopped its complaining. The exercise, perhaps, has done it good. Movement often helps more than rest, he has learned. The body wants to be used, wants to work, even as it ages. It is only when we stop moving, stop working, that we truly begin to decline. The street before him is lit now with oil lamps, casting pools of warm light at regular intervals. Between these pools, shadows gather and deepen, creating a rhythm of light and dark that Marcus finds pleasing. He turns left, heading now toward the harbor district, the next stage of his nightly circuit through Baiae. Part 4. The Harbor at Night. The walk from the springs to the harbor takes Marcus along a street he has traversed so many times that his feet know every irregularity in the pavement, every slight rise and dip. This is the street of the sailmakers, named for the workshops that line its eastern side, though in truth the street contains not just sailmakers, but also rope makers, ship's carpenters, and various other tradesmen whose work supports the maritime commerce that is so central to Baiae's prosperity. Most of these shops are closed now, their shutters pulled tight against the night, but here and there a light still burns in an upper window where the craftsmen live above their workshops. Marcus can hear fragments of domestic life as he passes. A woman singing to a child, the clink of dishes being washed, voices in conversation whose words are indistinct, but whose tone conveys contentment, ordinariness, the simple continuation of daily routine. The street slopes gently downward as it approaches the harbor, following the natural grade of the land toward the sea. Marcus can smell the salt more strongly now, can hear the soft sound of water lapping against stone, can sense in some indefinable way that open water is near. After so many years living in a coastal town, these sensory cues have become second nature, automatic as breathing. The harbor of Baiae is not large by the standards of major ports like Ostia or Alexandria, but it is well protected and deep enough to accommodate the merchant vessels and passenger ships that call here regularly. The harbor is shaped like a rough semicircle, its mouth facing west toward the open bay, its arms formed by two curved moles built of massive stone blocks, fitted together with iron clamps and sealed with a waterproof concrete that was the marvel of its age and remains sound more than a century after its construction. Marcus reaches the harbor front and pauses, as he always does, to take in the view. By day, this would be a scene of activity, ships loading and unloading cargo, merchants haggling over prices, sailors preparing vessels for departure or securing them after arrival, the constant movement and noise of commerce. But at night, the harbor becomes something different, something quieter and more contemplative. Several ships are moored along the quay, their masts rising like dark fingers against the slightly lighter darkness of the night sky. The vessels rock gently with the motion of the water, their timbers creaking in a rhythm that is both soothing and slightly melancholy. Lanterns hang from some of the masts and from posts along the quay, creating wavering reflections on the dark water that stretch and compress with each slight movement of the waves. Marcus walks slowly along the quay, his stick tapping on the stone. He can see figures on some of the ships, night watchmen most likely, guards left aboard to protect cargo from theft. One of them nods to Marcus as he passes, recognizing him as a regular presence in these nighttime hours. Marcus returns the nod, a silent exchange that requires no words, that simply acknowledges one human being to another in the shared experience of being awake while most of the world sleeps. The water in the harbor is nearly black at this hour, barely distinguishable from the sky, except where the lantern light touches it. But Marcus knows these waters well, has watched them in every season and every kind of weather. He knows how they turn gray-green in winter storms, how they sparkle like scattered diamonds in the midday summer sun, how they become smooth as polished bronze in the breathless calms that sometimes settle over the bay. Each mood has its beauty, its particular character, though Marcus has a special fondness for the harbor at night, when the water becomes mysterious, when its depth and power are suggested rather than displayed. A fishing boat is being secured to one of the mooring posts, having apparently just arrived. 2 men work efficiently in the lamplight, making lines fast, adjusting fenders, checking that everything is properly stowed. They work in silence, their movements coordinated by long practice, each knowing what the other will do without need for discussion. Marcus watches them for a moment, admiring their competence, the economical grace of their labor. One of the fishermen looks up and sees Marcus watching. "Evening, temple keeper," he calls out, his voice carrying easily across the quiet harbor. "Out for your walk?" "As always, Quintus," Marcus replies, recognizing the man. "Good fishing today." "Fair enough," Quintus says, straightening his back and stretching slightly. "The tunny are running, but we had to go far out to find them. The close waters have been thin lately." Marcus nods. He knows little about fishing beyond what he has absorbed through decades of living in a port town, but he understands enough to know that fish populations vary, that they move with the seasons and water temperatures, that sometimes they are abundant and sometimes scarce. The fishermen accept this variability as part of their work, just as Marcus accepts the varying numbers of supplicants who visit his temple. "Your partner keeps quiet," Marcus observes, noting that the second man has not looked up or acknowledged his presence. Quintus glances at his companion and smiles slightly. "That's my son, Marcus, 15 years old and thinks he knows everything. We had a disagreement about where to set the nets, and now he's sulking." Marcus suppresses a smile. The relationship between fathers and sons, the friction that comes as boys become men and begin to question their father's wisdom. This is as old as humanity itself. "He'll come around," Marcus says. "Time has a way of smoothing such things." "So I keep telling myself," Quintus says with a sigh. Then he raises his hand in farewell. "Good walking to you, temple keeper." "And good rest to you both," Marcus replies, moving on along the quay. The harbor curves ahead of him, and Marcus follows it, passing more moored vessels, more pools of lamplight, more dark water reflecting the scattered stars that have begun to appear overhead. The moon has not yet risen, or if it has, it is hidden behind the hills to the east, and so the night sky displays its full complement of stars without competition from the moon's brighter light. Marcus has always loved the stars, has spent many hours of his life watching them from the temple roof or during these evening walks. He knows the major constellations, can trace the path of the planets, can predict with reasonable accuracy when certain stars or groups of stars will rise and set. This knowledge feels important to him, though he would be hard-pressed to explain why. Perhaps it is simply that the stars provide a sense of continuity, of connection to something larger than individual human life. The same stars that shine tonight shone for his grandparents, will shine for his grandchildren if he had any, will continue shining long after every human currently alive has turned to dust. There is something both humbling and comforting in this thought. Humbling because it reminds him of his insignificance in the vast scale of cosmic time. Comforting because it suggests that some things endure, that not everything is subject to change and decay, that there are patterns and rhythms that transcend individual mortality. A cat appears from the shadows and walks along the quay ahead of him, its tail held high, its paws silent on the stone. Marcus watches it with idle interest, wondering where it is going, what particular cat business occupies its mind. The creature pauses at the edge of the quay, looking down into the water, perhaps seeing some movement below the surface. Then it loses interest and continues on, disappearing into the darkness beyond the reach of the nearest lamp. Marcus reaches the end of the main quay, where a smaller pier extends out into the harbor at a right angle. This pier is used primarily by the small boats, rowboats and skiffs and the light fishing vessels that work close to shore. Several such boats are tied up here, bumping gently against the pier's edge with each small movement of the water. The sound they make is rhythmic, almost musical, hollow wooden thumps that echo slightly in the enclosed space of the harbor. He stands at the end of the pier for a while, looking out towards the mouth of the harbor and the open bay beyond. From here, on a clear day, he can see across the bay to the distant mountains on the far shore. But at night, all of that is invisible, swallowed by darkness. Only the water is visible, only these few meters illuminated by the lanterns behind him. Beyond that, there could be anything or nothing. It is like looking at the edge of the world, Marcus thinks, though he knows intellectually that the bay continues, that the sea extends far beyond what his eyes can perceive. There is a bench at the end of the pier, and Marcus sits down carefully, testing its stability. The wood is damp with salt spray, but solid enough. He lays his walking stick beside him and simply sits, looking out at the darkness, listening to the soft sounds of water and wood, feeling the cool evening air on his face. How many hours has he spent like this over the decades, sitting in various spots around Baiae, watching, listening, simply being present to the world around him? Thousands of hours, certainly, perhaps tens of thousands, time that some might consider wasted, spent in contemplation rather than action, in observation rather than doing. But Marcus does not feel that this time has been wasted. These hours have taught him things that cannot be learned from books or instruction, things that can only be absorbed through patient attention to the world. He has learned, for instance, that water never repeats itself exactly. Each wave is unique, each pattern of ripples and reflections different from every other. And yet water also exhibits perfect consistency. It always seeks its own level, always responds to gravity and wind in predictable ways, always demonstrates the same essential properties, regardless of where or when it is observed. The paradox of infinite variation within absolute consistency. This is what water has taught him. He has learned that silence is not empty but full of small sounds that become audible only when louder noises recede, full of subtle movements and changes that escape notice in the midst of activity. The world is never truly still, never truly quiet. There's always something happening, some small drama of wind or water, or living creatures unfolding, if only one has the patience to notice. He has learned that beauty is more common than ugliness, that most of what exists in the world is either neutral or pleasant, that the harsh and terrible and painful things, while real and deserving of acknowledgement, are nevertheless exceptions rather than the rule. This is perhaps the most important thing his evening walks have taught him, that the world on balance is a gift rather than a burden, that existence itself is something to be grateful for. A sound reaches him from across the harbor, voices raised in song. Marcus cannot make out the words, but the melody is clear enough. One of the old sailors' songs that have been sung in Mediterranean ports since before Rome existed. Someone is celebrating something, or perhaps simply relieving the monotony of night watch duty with music. The song continues for a while, then fades away, absorbed by the darkness and distance. Marcus stands, retrieving his walking stick. The coolness of sitting has made his joints stiffen slightly, and it takes a moment for his body to adjust to movement again. He walks back along the pier to the main quay, then turns away from the harbor, heading now into the residential district that sprawls up the hillside beyond the waterfront. Part 5. The Villa Gardens. The transition from the commercial harbor district to the residential areas above is gradual rather than abrupt. First come the modest insulae where dock workers and fishermen and shopkeepers live. Multi-story buildings of brick and timber, their facades plain and functional, their windows small and shuttered against the night. Then, as the street climbs higher up the hillside, the buildings become more substantial, more ornate, the homes of successful merchants and minor officials, people who have prospered from Baiae's fame, but who have not yet attained the wealth and status of the true elite. Marcus walks slowly up the incline, his breathing measured and steady. The climb is not steep, but at his age any sustained upward movement requires attention and effort. He does not resent this. It is simply the reality of a body that has lived 7 decades, that has accumulated the wear and tear of a long life. If anything, he feels a kind of gratitude that he can still make this walk at all, that his legs remain strong enough to carry him, that his heart continues its faithful beating even under the stress of exertion. The street levels off as it reaches the villa district, and Marcus pauses to catch his breath and look back the way he has come. From this elevation he can see the harbor laid out below him like a map, the dark water dotted with the yellow points of lanterns, the masts of ships like slender lines drawn against the night. Beyond the harbor, the bay extends into darkness, vast and mysterious, and beyond that, invisible but present, the open sea. He turns and continues his walk, now moving along the street of laurels, so named for the trees that line both sides, their glossy leaves rustling softly in the evening breeze. This is one of the most pleasant streets in Baiae, wide and well-maintained, bordered by the walls of private gardens that belong to the villas of the wealthy. These walls are high, designed to provide privacy and security, but they are also beautiful, made of smoothly plastered stone, sometimes painted with frescoes, often topped with decorative tiles. Through gaps and gateways in these walls, Marcus can catch glimpses of the gardens beyond. Even in the darkness, aided only by occasional torches and the starlight filtering through the tree branches, he can see shapes and shadows that suggest the beauty hidden behind these barriers. Tall cypresses stand like sentinels. The spreading branches of fig trees create complex patterns against the sky. Here and there, a fountain or statue is visible, placed to create a focal point, a moment of visual interest. Marcus has rarely been inside these private gardens, but he has seen enough of them over the years to know their general character. They are designed according to the principles that wealthy Romans have refined over centuries, a combination of formal geometric layouts and carefully managed naturalism. Straight paths bordered by clipped hedges lead to circular clearings where statues of gods or ancestors stand guard. Water features are common, fountains, channels, pools, both for their cooling effect in the summer heat and for the pleasant sound of moving water, and everywhere plants chosen for their beauty, their fragrance, their symbolic significance. The scent of jasmine reaches Marcus on the breeze, thick and sweet and almost overwhelming in its intensity. Somewhere in one of these gardens, jasmine vines are blooming, releasing their perfume into the night air. Marcus breathes deeply, drawing the scent into his lungs, and feels something in his chest relax, some tension he had not been consciously aware of carrying. Jasmine, he knows, has long been associated with love and sensuality, with the pleasures of night and the intimacies that darkness permits. Young lovers in Rome give jasmine flowers to their beloveds. Courtesan's perfume often contains jasmine oil. The scent has such strong associations that Marcus has heard some of the more austere moralists complain about its use, claiming that it encourages immoderate passions. But to Marcus, the jasmine simply smells beautiful. If people choose to attach symbolic meanings to it, to use it as part of their romantic rituals, that is their business. The flower itself is innocent, simply doing what flowers do, releasing fragrance to attract pollinators, fulfilling its role in the endless cycle of growth and reproduction that keeps the world populated with living things. He passes a gate that stands slightly ajar, and through the opening he can see into a garden that is better lit than most. Torches on tall stands illuminate a central area where a group of people are seated around a table, apparently taking their evening meal outdoors, enjoying the pleasant temperature and the privacy of their garden. Marcus can hear their voices, though not their words. The rise and fall of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter, the comfortable sounds of people at ease in each other's company. He does not linger or stare. That would be rude, an invasion of their privacy. But as he passes, he catches a glimpse of the scene. Well-dressed men and women reclining on couches in the Roman style, slaves moving among them with platters of food and pitchers of wine. The warm glow of torchlight making everything seem golden and slightly unreal, like a scene from a painting or a dream. For a moment, Marcus feels a small pang of something that might be envy, or might simply be wistfulness. He has never lived in such circumstances, has never had the wealth or status to afford a villa with a beautiful garden, has never reclined at a table surrounded by friends and family, while slaves attended to every need. His life has been simpler, more modest, oriented around service to the temple and to the community, rather than around the accumulation of wealth and comfort. But the pang passes quickly, replaced by something closer to contentment, because while he has not had those things, he has had other things. The satisfaction of work he finds meaningful, the respect of the community, the freedom that comes with modest means and few obligations. These evening walks through Baiae that have taught him so much about the world and about himself. And besides, he thinks, those people in that garden with all their wealth and privilege, they too will age, will sicken, will die. Their fine villa and beautiful garden will pass to others, will change hands again and again, will perhaps eventually crumble and decay, as all human constructions eventually do. In the end, we are all equal before death, all equally temporary, all equally subject to time's patient dissolution. This thought should be depressing, Marcus supposes, but he finds it strangely comforting. It reminds him not to grasp too tightly at things, not to mistake the temporary for the permanent, not to build his sense of self on foundations that will inevitably shift and crack. The Street of Laurels curves gently as it follows the contour of the hillside, and Marcus follows it, letting his walking stick tap its steady rhythm on the paving stones. The villas continue on both sides, their walls creating a kind of canyon that channels the breeze, concentrating it so that Marcus feels the wind more strongly here than he did down by the harbor. A dog barks somewhere behind one of the walls, a deep resonant sound that carries authority. Guard dogs are common in these wealthy households, trained to sound alarm at any intrusion, any threat to property or family. The barking continues for a moment, then stops abruptly, perhaps silenced by a command from its handler, perhaps simply having lost interest in whatever triggered its alert. Marcus passes another gate, this one firmly closed and locked, but he can hear water running somewhere beyond the wall. A fountain, presumably, or perhaps one of the engineered streams that some villa owners create in their gardens, bringing water down from the hillside springs through ceramic pipes and channels to create the illusion of a natural brook. Romans love their water features, Marcus reflects. Perhaps it is because so much of the empire is dry, arid land, where water is precious and must be carefully conserved. To have abundant water, to waste it on fountains and decorative pools, becomes a display of wealth and power. Or perhaps it is simpler than that. Perhaps people simply enjoy the sound and sight of moving water, the way it catches light and creates motion, the cooling effect it has on hot days, the way it makes spaces feel alive and dynamic rather than static. Marcus can understand that impulse. His own modest dwelling has no fountain, no garden to speak of. But he has his evening walks that take him past springs and harbors, that immerse him in the sound and smell and presence of water. In his own way, he has what the villa owners have: access to water's beauty and its gift of tranquility. The street opens up ahead into a small plaza where several roads converge. In the center stands a shrine to Venus, the goddess who is particularly honored in Baiae due to the town's reputation as a place of pleasure and indulgence. The shrine is small but elegant, consisting of a statue of the goddess on a raised platform surrounded by a low stone balustrade. Someone has left fresh flowers at the base of the statue. Roses, Marcus notices, the traditional flower of Venus. He approaches the shrine and stands before it for a moment, looking up at the statue. Venus is depicted here in her most modest aspect, fully clothed, her expression serene rather than seductive. This is Venus as the mother of Aeneas, as the divine ancestor of the Roman people, as a force for harmony and civilization rather than simply lust and passion. Marcus appreciates this choice. While he does not judge those who seek pleasure in Baiae's more hedonistic attractions, he has always been more drawn to the dignified, contemplative aspects of the gods. A small oil lamp burns in a niche beside the statue, its flame protected from the wind by a glass cylinder. Marcus watches the flame for a moment, sees how it wavers and dances despite the protection, responding to currents of air too subtle for him to feel. The flame reminds him of the sacred fire he tends in the temple of Mercury, that eternal flame that must never be allowed to go out, that represents the continuity of worship, the unbroken chain of devotion stretching back through generations. He has tended that flame for 52 years now, adding oil when needed, trimming the wick, shielding it from drafts, ensuring that it burns clean and bright. 52 years of daily attention to this single task. 52 years of maintaining this one small constant in a world of change and uncertainty. It might seem like a small thing, a humble accomplishment, but Marcus has come to understand that the small things matter, that the patient maintenance of ordinary rituals and routines is what holds civilization together, what keeps chaos at bay. He moves on from the shrine, crossing the plaza and taking the street that leads further up the hillside toward the oldest part of Baiae, where the villas are largest and most magnificent, where the views of the bay are most spectacular, where the wealthiest and most powerful families maintain their country residences. Marcus does not often walk this far into the villa district. It feels presumptuous somehow, like trespassing in a world where he does not belong. But tonight, he continues upward, drawn by some impulse he does not fully understand, some desire to complete the circuit fully, to push his walk just a bit further than usual. The street narrows as it climbs, becoming more of a lane than a proper street, bordered on both sides by high walls that seem to lean inward slightly, creating a sense of enclosure. The paving stones here are older, more worn, polished smooth by centuries of foot traffic. This path predates the current villas, Marcus knows. It was probably here when Baiae was just a small Greek settlement, perhaps even earlier, used by the indigenous peoples who first discovered the healing springs. The thought fills him with a sense of connection, of participating in something larger than his individual life. His feet are following paths that countless other feet have followed before him, wearing the stone a fraction more with each step, contributing his tiny portion to the long, slow work of erosion and change that eventually transforms all landscapes. Part 6. The Forum Remembered. The lane emerges onto a wider street, and Marcus finds himself at the edge of what was once Baiae's main forum, the civic heart of the town, in earlier days. The forum is not used much anymore. Newer, more fashionable public spaces have drawn away the crowds, and what remains here has a slightly neglected feeling, a sense of faded glory. But Marcus has always loved this place, precisely because it carries that weight of history, that reminder of how things change and shift over time. The Forum is a large rectangular space, paved with broad stones that have been worn smooth and slightly uneven by generations of use. On three sides, colonnaded walkways provide shelter from sun and rain, though several of the columns show signs of damage. Cracks sealed with mortar, missing capitals replaced with mismatched pieces, stains where water has seeped through the roofing. On the fourth side stands what was once the town's basilica, a large public building where legal matters were adjudicated and civic business conducted. It still serves this function, Marcus knows, but on a much reduced scale, handling only the most routine administrative tasks, while important matters are referred to larger towns or to Rome itself. At this hour, the Forum is empty except for a few stray cats and one elderly man who sits on a bench beneath the colonnade, apparently sleeping. Marcus walks slowly across the open space, his footsteps echoing slightly off the surrounding buildings. The acoustic properties of the Forum are remarkable. A voice raised in this space can be heard clearly from any point within it. which is why orators and officials traditionally addressed the public from the raised platform that still stands at one end. Marcus approaches that platform now, a rectangular structure of marble blocks rising about a meter above the forum floor. Steps on three sides provide access, and the flat top is large enough to accommodate several speakers at once. This platform has seen so much, Marcus thinks. Speeches advocating for war or peace, announcements of imperial decrees, proclamations of births and deaths and marriages among the town's notable families, celebrations and lamentations, the full range of human affairs played out in public view. He climbs the steps, carefully, mindful of his balance, and stands on the platform, looking out across the empty forum. For a moment, he allows himself to imagine what this space must have looked like in its prime, perhaps a century ago, when Baiae's fame was at its height. He sees the forum crowded with people, merchants displaying their wares beneath the colonnades, philosophers and teachers holding forth to small groups of students, citizens arguing about politics or business, the constant flow and press of humanity going about its daily business. The image is so vivid in his mind that it almost feels real, as if the forum stones have absorbed those earlier days and now radiate them back to anyone willing to perceive. This is what history means, Marcus thinks. Not just the names and dates that scholars record, but the lived experience of ordinary people going about their lives, loving and working and worrying and hoping, all of it unfolding in these same physical spaces that we continue to inhabit. A slight breeze stirs the air, and Marcus shivers slightly, though whether from cold or from something else he cannot say. There is a quality to this place at night, a thickness to the silence that suggests presence, that makes him feel as though he is not entirely alone. Not ghosts exactly. Marcus does not believe in such things, or tells himself he does not. But something, the accumulated weight of all those lives perhaps, all those moments, all those now vanished people who once stood where he stands, who once looked out at this same forum, who once felt the same stones beneath their feet. He descends from the platform and continues his circuit of the forum, walking beneath the colonnade where patches of roof provide intermittent shelter from the open sky. Here and there, shops still operate. A wine cellar, a baker, a cobbler. Their shutters closed now, but bearing the signs and symbols that mark their trade. These are modest establishments, serving the ordinary needs of ordinary people, a far cry from the fancy boutiques and luxury emporiums that line the streets nearer the great bath complexes. But there is something honest about these simple shops, Marcus thinks, something real and necessary. The wine cellar provides wine, the baker provides bread, the cobbler mends worn sandals. These are the fundamental services that keep society functioning, that meet actual needs rather than manufactured desires. In a town known for its luxury and excess, these modest shops remind him that beneath all the ostentation, people still need the basics: food, drink, clothing, shelter. He passes what was once a grand entrance to the forum, a gateway topped with an arch that probably supported a statue or inscription, though both are long gone now, removed or fallen away at some point in the past. Only the arch remains, its stones fitted together in that precise way that Roman engineers perfected, each block supporting the others in a perfect distribution of forces that has kept the structure standing for more than a century. Through the arch, he can see another street leading away into the residential districts beyond. A few lights are visible in distant windows, small yellow glows that speak of people still awake, still going about whatever business occupies their evening hours. Marcus wonders about those people, as he often does during his walks. Who are they? What are they doing? What concerns keep them from sleep? Perhaps a mother sits beside a sick child, monitoring fever, offering comfort in the long watches of the night. Perhaps a merchant reviews his accounts, calculating profits and losses, planning tomorrow's business. Perhaps a young couple lies together in the first flush of love, whispering and laughing and discovering each other. Perhaps an old person, like Marcus himself, simply cannot sleep, troubled by aches and pains or by memories that surface more readily in darkness than in daylight. All of these possibilities exist simultaneously. Marcus thinks, countless private dramas unfolding behind those anonymous walls, invisible to him but no less real for their invisibility. The world is so much larger than what any one person can perceive or know. We live surrounded by other lives, other experiences, other realities that we can only dimly imagine. The thought should be humbling, and it is, but it is also oddly comforting, because if his own life is just one small thread in this vast tapestry, then his mistakes and failures and disappointments are also small, are also just tiny elements in a pattern too large to be grasped by any individual perspective. The things that have troubled him over the years, opportunities missed, relationships mishandled, words spoken in anger, or left unspoken in cowardice. All of these loom large in his own memory, but are essentially invisible in the broader sweep of human affairs. This is not to say they don't matter. They matter to him, and they mattered to the people affected by them. But they do not matter in the cosmic sense, do not alter the fundamental nature of reality, do not change the course of history. And there is a strange freedom in acknowledging this, in accepting the limits of his own significance. He completes his circuit of the forum and exits through the arch, stepping into the street beyond. This street is quieter than most, less well-traveled, lined with older buildings that have a slightly shabby dignity. The people who live here are not wealthy, but neither are they poor. Craftsmen, minor officials, teachers, the solid middle rank of Roman society, who keep things running without attracting much attention or acclaim. A window opens above him, and a woman leans out to shake dust from a cloth. She does not see Marcus below, or if she does, she gives no sign of it. She shakes the cloth vigorously, sending a small cloud of dust into the air, where it catches the lamplight and hangs suspended for a moment before dispersing. Then she withdraws, closing the shutters behind her, and Marcus continues on his way. The street curves and begins to climb again, leading toward the oldest part of Baiae, the area where the first Greek colonists built their settlement, where the foundations of buildings predate Rome itself. This is where Marcus is headed now, following an impulse that has grown stronger as his walk has progressed. He wants to see the old stones, wants to stand where humans first recognized this place as special, as worthy of settlement and habitation. Part 7. The Ancient Hilltop. The climb is steeper here, and Marcus must pause several times to rest, to let his breathing slow and his heartbeat return to its normal rhythm. He is not as young as he once was, and his body reminds him of this with increasing frequency. But he persists, setting his walking stick firmly with each step, testing his footing before committing his weight, moving with the careful deliberation that age requires. The street becomes a path, the paving stones giving way to packed earth, worn smooth by centuries of foot traffic. On either side, the buildings fall away, replaced by scrubby vegetation and occasional outcroppings of rock. This is the edge of the developed area, the boundary between town and the wild lands that still exist in the hills above Baiae. The path switchbacks up the hillside, and with each turn, Marcus can see more of Baiae spread out below him. The town is a constellation of lights now, yellow points marking streets and homes and public buildings, all of it surrounded by the darker mass of the bay and the hills. From this height, the town looks small, vulnerable, a tiny pocket of human order carved out of the vast indifference of nature. But it is beautiful, too, Marcus thinks. Beautiful in the way that all human settlements are beautiful when seen from a distance, when the details of daily life are obscured, and what remains is simply the fact of people coming together, creating community, building shelters and lighting fires and pushing back against the darkness. The path levels out as it reaches the hilltop, and Marcus finds himself in a small clearing surrounded by ancient stones. These are the oldest structures in Baiae, the foundation walls of buildings that were already ruins when the Romans arrived. No one knows who built them or when, though scholars speculate they might be the work of the indigenous people who lived here before the Greek colonization, or perhaps even the Greeks themselves in their earliest period of settlement. The stones are rough-hewn, irregular in shape, fitted together without mortar in a style that speaks of great age. Many have fallen or been displaced over the centuries, creating jumbles and piles that nature has begun to reclaim, with grass and small shrubs growing from cracks and crevices. But the general outline of the structures is still visible. Rectangular foundations that probably supported wooden buildings, a circular arrangement that might have been a well or grain storage pit, what looks like the base of a defensive wall. Marcus walks slowly among these ruins, running his hand along the stones, feeling their rough texture, their solidness, their patient endurance. These stones have been here for centuries, perhaps for a millennium or more. They have witnessed the entire history of Baiae, have seen the town grow from a small settlement to a famous resort, have watched countless human lives come and go like mayflies, brief flickers of consciousness in the vast, slow time of stone and earth. There is a large, flat stone near the center of the clearing, and Marcus sits down on it carefully. The stone is cool but not cold, still holding a trace of the day's warmth. He lays his walking stick beside him and simply sits, looking out at the view. From this elevation he can see not just Baiae, but the entire sweep of the bay, stretching away to the north and south until it fades into darkness. To the west, the open sea is a vast black emptiness, indistinguishable from the sky except where a few stars reflect on the water's surface. And scattered across this darkness are tiny points of light. Ships at anchor, fishing boats with their lanterns, perhaps even other coastal towns too distant to make out as anything more than faint glimmers. The moon has risen now, Marcus notices. It hangs low in the eastern sky, not quite full but close to it, its face marked with those familiar patterns that people see as the features of a face, or the silhouette of a rabbit, or any number of other images that human imagination projects onto its surface. The moonlight is strong enough to cast shadows, to silver-hair the landscape with pale illumination that makes everything look slightly unreal, slightly magical. Marcus breathes deeply, drawing the night air into his lungs. Up here, away from the town, the air is cleaner, fresher, carrying scents of wild herbs and sun-warmed stone and earth. He can smell thyme and rosemary, oregano and sage, all the aromatic plants that grow wild on these hillsides. These scents speak of the Mediterranean world, of the lands around this ancient sea, where humans have lived and built and fought and dreamed for thousands of years. He thinks about all the people who might have sat on this same stone over the centuries, the builders who first placed it here, whoever they were, the Greek colonists who came later and repurposed these ruins for their own settlements, Roman soldiers who garrisoned this height in earlier, more turbulent times, other old men like himself, seeking a quiet place to think, to remember, to come to terms with the accumulated weight of years. All of them are gone now, of course. Whatever thoughts they had, whatever concerns occupied their minds, whatever joys and sorrows filled their days, all of it has vanished, dissolved into the past, leaving behind only these stones and the land itself. And eventually even the stones will crumble, Marcus thinks, will break down into soil and dust, will return to the earth from which they came. Nothing lasts forever. Everything is temporary. But somehow, knowing this does not fill him with despair. Instead, it makes each moment feel more precious, more worthy of attention and appreciation. A night bird calls from somewhere in the scrub below, a long liquid trill that rises and falls and then fades away. Marcus listens to the echo of it, the way the sound lingers in the air for just a moment before being absorbed by the vastness of the night. He does not know what kind of bird makes that call. Despite his decades in Baiae, despite his evening walks and his careful attention to the world around him, there are still mysteries, still things he cannot name or explain. And perhaps that is as it should be, he thinks. Perhaps the world should retain some mysteries, some things that resist our attempts to categorize and understand. Perhaps it is enough simply to hear the bird's call, to appreciate its beauty, without needing to know the species or understand the behavior that prompts it. The stars are fully visible now, scattered across the sky in their countless multitudes. Marcus has always found the stars overwhelming if he thinks about them too much. The sheer number of them, the vast distances they represent, the cold certainty that they are not the small lights they appear to be, but rather enormous spheres of fire, suns in their own right, perhaps even accompanied by their own planets and moons. The cosmos is so large, so incomprehensibly vast, that the human mind cannot really grasp it. We can know it intellectually, can calculate distances and masses and velocities, but we cannot feel it, cannot truly comprehend what such vastness means. And yet, Marcus thinks, we live our lives as if this tiny corner of space, this small planet, this particular town, this individual body, is all that matters. And perhaps it is all that matters, at least to us, because we have no choice but to live in the particular, in the specific, in the immediate circumstances of our individual existence. We cannot live in the abstract realm of cosmic vastness. We can only live here, now, in this body, in this moment. A meteor streaks across the sky, a brilliant line of light that appears and disappears in less than a second. Marcus follows its trajectory with his eyes, marveling at its beauty, at its transience, gone almost before it can be registered, leaving behind nothing but the memory of light. And yet for that brief moment, it existed. It was real. It wrote its path across the heavens. Like a human life, Marcus thinks, brief, transient, gone almost before it can be registered against the vast backdrop of cosmic time. And yet while it lasts, while we are here, we are real, we matter, we write our paths across our small patch of earth and sky. He sits in silence for a long time, watching the stars, listening to the night sounds, the wind in the scrub, the distant sound of the sea, the occasional call of a bird or animal, the rustle of something small moving through the vegetation. Time passes in a way that feels both slow and fast, both full and empty. He is simply here, present to this moment, to this place, to this body that has carried him through 73 years of living. Eventually, he becomes aware that he is growing stiff from sitting, that his body is reminding him that it needs to move, that stillness too prolonged becomes uncomfortable. He stands slowly, working the stiffness out of his joints, retrieving his walking stick. The moon has climbed higher in the sky, and by its light he can see the path clearly enough to make his way back down the hillside safely. He takes one last look at the ruins, at the ancient stones that have stood here for so long. He feels a kinship with them, a sense of connection. They too are old, weathered by time, marked by their years. They too persist, endure, continue to occupy their place in the world despite age and damage. There is something dignified in that persistence, Marcus thinks, something worth honoring. He turns and begins his descent, moving carefully, testing each step before committing his weight. The path is clear in the moonlight, easier to see than it was on the climb up. Gravity assists him now, though he must be careful not to let momentum carry him too quickly, must maintain control of his pace and balance. As he descends, Baiae comes back into view, slowly revealing itself in stages, first just the highest buildings, then more and more of the town spreading out below him, until finally the whole sweep of settlement is visible once more, still lit by its constellation of lamps and lanterns, still pursuing the activities that occupy human beings when darkness falls. The transition from the wild hilltop back into the town feels significant somehow, as if he is crossing a boundary between different modes of being. Up on the hill among the ancient stones under the open sky, he had felt connected to something larger, something that transcends individual human existence. But now, returning to the town, to the realm of human activity and concern, he feels himself condensing back into his particular identity, his individual life. Both modes are necessary, Marcus thinks. We need to touch the larger rhythms, need to feel our connection to something beyond ourselves. But we also need to return to the particular, to the specific demands and rewards of daily life. The trick is to hold both perspectives simultaneously, to live in the immediate present, while also remaining aware of the vaster context that surrounds and contains that present. Part 8. The Homeward Path. The path rejoins the street, and Marcus finds himself back among buildings, back in the constructed environment of the town. But the town feels different to him now, altered somehow by his time on the hilltop. Or perhaps he is the one who has been altered, his perspective shifted by the silence and the stars and the ancient stones. He makes his way back down through the villa district, retracing in reverse the route he took earlier in the evening. The same high walls, the same glimpses of gardens, the same scent of jasmine on the air. But everything seems softer now, gentler, as if viewed through a veil of moonlight and fatigue. His body is tired from the long walk and the climb, and this tiredness adds to the dreamlike quality of the experience. A few more lights have been extinguished in the windows above him. The town is settling toward sleep, the daily cycle winding down, people retiring to their beds to rest and renew themselves for tomorrow's efforts. Marcus feels a kinship with this gradual settling, this collective movement toward rest. He, too, is ready for sleep, ready to lay down his body's burden and let consciousness dissolve into the dark waters of dreams. But he is not quite ready yet. His walk is not complete. He must return to his starting point, must complete the circuit, must bring the evening to its proper conclusion. There is something important about finishing what you start. Marcus has always believed. Too many things in life remain incomplete, unfinished, abandoned before their natural end. But these evening walks, these at least he can complete, can see through from beginning to end, can bring to their proper resolution. He reaches the Street of Laurels and turns onto it, heading now back toward the Temple district. The laurel trees are dark shapes against the slightly lighter sky, their leaves rustling in the breeze with a sound like whispered conversation. Marcus has always loved this street, has always found its tree-lined length peaceful and conducive to thought. The shrines to Venus looms ahead of him in the plaza, pale in the moonlight. The lamp still burns beside the statue, its small flame refusing to surrender to the surrounding darkness. Marcus approaches and pauses, as he did earlier, looking up at the goddess's serene face. She seems to watch him with an expression that is neither approving nor disapproving, merely observant, merely present. He thinks about Venus, about what she represents. Love, yes, but also harmony, connection, the force that draws things together rather than pushing them apart. In a world that contains so much conflict, so much division and strife, the impulse toward connection feels increasingly precious. The desire to reach out to another person, to form bonds of affection or friendship or family, this is what makes life bearable, what makes it worthwhile. Marcus has lived much of his later life in solitude, but he has not been lonely. The community of Baiae has provided him with a sense of connection, of belonging. The people who visit his temple, who he sees on his walks, who he exchanges greetings with in the market. All of these constitute a kind of extended family, a web of relationships that, while not as intense as marriage or parenthood, nevertheless provides texture and meaning to his days. He moves on from the shrine, leaving the plaza and entering the narrower streets that lead back toward the Temple district. He knows these streets so well that he could walk them blindfolded. Every turn, every building, every unevenness in the paving, all of it is mapped in his memory, part of the geography of his daily life. A dog trots past him, moving with purpose, clearly on some canine errand that makes perfect sense to itself, if to no one else. The dog does not acknowledge Marcus, does not slow or change course, simply continues on its way with single-minded determination. Marcus smiles at this. He likes dogs, likes their straightforward nature, their lack of pretense or complication. The temple district comes into view ahead, and Marcus feels a small lifting in his spirits, almost home, almost to the end of his journey. The temples rise against the night sky, their shapes familiar and reassuring. These buildings have been the background to his entire adult life. He has seen them in every season, every kind of weather, every time of day and night. They are as much a part of him as his own body, as essential to his sense of self. He passes the temple of Diana, where old Lucia made her evening devotions hours ago. The temple is dark now, its doors closed and locked against the night. During the day, temples remain open, accessible to anyone who wishes to make an offering or say a prayer. But at night, they are sealed, the sacred spaces protected from intrusion or defilement. The Temple of Venus is likewise closed, its elegant facade serene in the moonlight. Marcus has always admired this temple, has always appreciated its beauty, even though it is not his responsibility to maintain it. Beauty, he thinks, belongs to everyone, not just to those who create or care for it. A beautiful building, a beautiful landscape, a beautiful work of art, these are gifts to all who behold them, regardless of ownership or official duty. And now, finally, he reaches the Temple of Mercury, his temple, the focus of his life's work. The building looks just as he left it hours ago, unchanged, solid, patient. He climbs the steps to the entrance, moving slowly, mindful of his tired legs and the darkness. At the top of the steps, he pauses and turns to look back at the town one more time. Baiae is quiet now, most of its residents asleep or preparing for sleep. The lights have diminished, leaving only the essential lamps that mark streets and public buildings. The moon hangs higher in the sky, smaller seeming now, more distant. And beyond the town, the bay stretches dark and vast, connected to the open sea, and from there to all the waters of the world. Marcus feels a profound sense of gratitude in this moment, for his life, for this place, for the ability to walk these streets and witness the transition from day to night, for consciousness itself, that strange gift that allows him to experience and reflect on experience. He has not had an extraordinary life by the world's standards. He has not achieved great things, has not left any lasting mark on history, has not accumulated wealth or fame or power. But he has lived, fully and consciously, paying attention to the world around him, finding meaning in ordinary moments, learning what the years and the walking have taught him. He turns back to the temple door and opens it with the large key he carries. The door swings inward silently. He keeps the hinges well oiled, and he steps into the interior. The sacred flame still burns on the altar, as it has burned continuously for more than a century, perhaps longer. By its light, Marcus can see the familiar interior of the temple, the walls with their frescoes depicting Mercury in his various aspects, the benches where supplicants sit, the offering tables laden with gifts from the faithful. He approaches the altar and checks the flame, adds a small amount of oil to ensure it will burn through the remaining hours of darkness. This is his final duty of the day, the last task, before he can retire to his small dwelling attached to the temple's rear wall. Tend the flame, secure the temple, rest. This is the rhythm that structures his life, the pattern he follows with grateful faithfulness. With the flame tended, Marcus moves through the temple one more time, checking that everything is in order, that nothing has been disturbed or overlooked. This inspection is more ritual than necessity. He knows everything is fine, knows he left it all properly arranged earlier in the evening. But the checking helps him transition from the walking, from the external world, back into his role as guardian of this sacred space. Satisfied, he extinguishes the lamps he had left burning, leaving only the eternal flame to illuminate the interior. Then he makes his way to the small door that connects the temple to his dwelling. A modest room with a bed, a table, a few shelves for his possessions, a small stove for cooking. It is not much, but it is enough, more than enough. After all, how much space does one old man need? He removes his sandals, places his walking stick in its usual corner, hangs his outer tunic on its peg. The routine of these simple actions is soothing, preparing his body and mind for sleep. He lights a small oil lamp on the table, its flame casting gentle shadows on the walls. There's bread and cheese on the table, left over from his midday meal. He is hungry now, he realizes, and he eats slowly, savoring the simple food, washing it down with water from the clay pitcher. After so many hours of walking and thinking and observing, the food tastes especially good, satisfying a need that goes beyond mere physical hunger. When he has eaten, he extinguishes the lamp and lies down on his bed. The mattress is thin but comfortable, broken in by years of use, shaped to his body. He pulls the woolen blanket up to his chest and lies on his back, looking up at the ceiling that he cannot see in the darkness. His body is tired, pleasantly so, the kind of tiredness that comes from healthful exertion rather than exhaustion. His legs ache slightly. His feet are sore. But these are good pains, honest pains, the price of movement and life. He breathes deeply, slowly, letting his body begin its descent towards sleep. Images from the walk float through his mind, the harbor with its lanterns reflected in dark water, the jasmine scent in the villa district, the ancient stones on the hilltop, the stars scattered across the infinite sky. These images blur together, losing their distinct edges, becoming more feeling than seeing, more memory than perception. Marcus feels himself drifting now, consciousness beginning its nightly dissolution. But before sleep claims him entirely, he offers a silent prayer of gratitude, not to Mercury specifically, not to any particular god, but to whatever force or principle governs existence, whatever mystery lies at the heart of being. Thank you for this day, he thinks. Thank you for these legs that still carry me, for these eyes that still see, for this heart that still beats. Thank you for Baiae, for the sea, and the springs and the stars. Thank you for the walk, for the evening, for the quiet gift of being alive. And then sleep comes, gentle and complete, and Marcus descends into dreams where he walks again through the streets of Baiae, where the light is always golden and the water always shimmers and the path stretches on forever into distances that have no end. The temple flame continues to burn, patient and unwavering. The moon continues its arc across the sky, indifferent to human concerns. The bay continues its gentle breathing, waves lapping at stone, eternal as time itself. And in his small room Marcus sleeps the sleep of the just and the tired, his body at rest, his mind at peace. Another day completed, another evening walked and witnessed and remembered. Tomorrow he will wake, and the sun will rise, and the cycle will begin again. There will be supplicants to attend, offerings to receive, prayers to witness, and when evening comes, he will walk again, following the same paths, seeing the same streets, transformed by failing light, touching again the living stones of this ancient town. But all of that belongs to tomorrow. For now, there is only sleep, only darkness, only the slow breathing of an old man at rest, only the silence of night settling over Baiae like a blessing, like a promise that rest will come, that peace is possible, that the world continues its patient turning, whether we wake or sleep, whether we witness or dream. And somewhere in that sleep, somewhere in those dreams, Marcus walks still, will always walk, eternal in the evening light that never quite fades into full darkness, preserved forever in that liminal hour when day surrenders to night and the world holds its breath, and everything seems possible, seems sacred, seems suffused with a meaning too deep for words. The flame burns, the water flows, the stars wheel overhead, and all is well, all is as it should be, all is held in the gentle hands of time that carries us forward toward whatever comes next, patient and implacable and finally kind. Rest now, sleep now, let the day relax its hold, let consciousness dissolve like sugar in warm water, sweetening the dark. Let the body sink into the mattress, heavy and grateful. Let the mind unclench. Let thoughts scatter like birds at dusk. Let everything soften and blur and fade. The walk is complete. The circuit is closed. The temple keeper is home. Baiae sleeps beneath its guardian stars. And you, dear traveler, you too can rest now, can close your eyes and trust that the world will continue without your vigilant watching, can surrender to sleep's gentle insistence, knowing that tomorrow will come, that the sun will rise, that there will be other walks, other evenings, other opportunities to witness beauty and feel connection, and remember that we are all part of something larger than ourselves. But for now, only this, the soft embrace of darkness, the slow fade of consciousness, the deep and dreamless peace that comes when the day's walking is done, and the body finds its rest and sleep, sweet sleep, arrives at last, like an old friend, like a homecoming, like the end of every journey and the beginning of every renewal. Sleep now. Walk no more. Rest in the darkness that is not empty but full, not frightening but comforting, not an ending but a transition, not death but merely sleep, only sleep, blessed sleep, eternal sleep that refreshes and restores and makes all things new again. The temple keeper sleeps, Baiae sleeps, the world sleeps and wakes and sleeps again in cycles as old as time itself. And you sleep too now, falling gently into dreams where the light is golden, and the water shimmers and the path stretches on forever, through a town that exists both in memory and in that eternal present, where all things that have ever been remain somehow alive, somehow real, somehow waiting for us to return and walk those streets again in the company of all who have walked them before. Good night, traveler. Sleep well. Rest deeply. The walking is done. The evening is complete. All is well. All is well. All shall be well. And in the morning, when you wake, perhaps you will remember something of this walk, something of this ancient town by the bay, where an old man tended his flame and walked his paths, and found his peace. Perhaps you will carry with you some fragment of that peace, that sense of connection, that reminder that we are all walking together through this strange and beautiful world, all making our way from light to darkness and back again, all seeking rest, all seeking home, all seeking that place where we can finally lay down our burdens and say, yes, this is enough. This life has been enough. I am grateful. I am ready. I can rest now. Rest now. Rest. Rest. Sleep comes like tide returning, inevitable and gentle, carrying you away from shore into deeper waters where consciousness dissolves and dreams begin, and everything softens into that perfect darkness where nothing is required, nothing demanded, nothing needed but to simply be, to simply breathe, to simply exist in the blessed suspension of sleep. The flame burns lower, the moon sets, the stars fade as dawn approaches, but you do not see this. You are sleeping now, deeply sleeping, dreaming perhaps of ancient streets and thermal springs, of harbors lit by lanterns, of old men walking, of temples and gardens and the endless patient turning of the world. Sleep. 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 The temple keeper sleeps beside you. All of Baiae sleeps. All of the world sleeps in this moment that is also every moment. This night that is also every night. This rest that is also every rest, since humans first closed their eyes and trusted the darkness to hold them safely until morning. And it does. It always has. It always will. Sleep, sweet sleep, faithful sleep, arrives and holds you and keeps you and carries you through the dark hours toward whatever morning brings. Rest now, dear walker. Rest now, dear witness. Rest now, dear soul. Your evening walk is complete. You are home. If you're still here, if you have walked these streets with me, if you have listened to the quiet places between my footsteps, then thank you. Thank you for keeping me company this evening, for walking beside an old man through a town that remembers, for giving your attention, your breath, your time. Now you may rest. The walk is finished. The flame is tended. The night will hold us gently. Sleep well, traveler. I will walk again tomorrow, and perhaps somewhere between memory and dream we will meet again.